I feel like these kids are my kids and I want to make sure they get the help. So anyway, it's something I deal with all the time.
I agree with you. The one of the things I want to pull out of what you said. Oh yes, Greg.
I want to just welcome everybody to where it really goes down, overtime. What's your point, overtime? Welcome everybody on Facebook and on fox26houston.com. Marcus, continue with your comments.
You mentioned the parents, and you have to consider the fact that this is a generational thing, right? Which is why the at-risk today is so important, because these children today, if there's no intervention, they will be parents tomorrow, and then we'll be looking at their children wondering what.
And I agree. So one of the things,
and that's why the point that Holly, the question I was going to ask, I know what the county core services and what they're responsible for, and the immediate issues. The question, like the when does life begin, right? Before birth or in the fetus, or what? The question is, when does immediate begin? On which side of the lane does immediate begin? Is it not immediate that a crime that's happening in the county now? Yes. Is it not immediate that a child is being deprived and will fall into that vicious cycle? Yeah. And the answer is,
and I'm with you on that. I'm absolutely, I just want to clarify, I'm totally for these youth intervention programs. I am also very concerned about what's happening in the school districts and why children are getting to third grade and not able to read, write, and do math on a third grade level. That is huge.
Yeah, look, some of the high schools that we're working with, and you're seeing high school students that are not literate, it is disheartening.
Really
and with regard to the $11 million fiasco, that the most unfortunate part about this is that $11 million could have gone with that $4 million that's going to these at-risk kids, and it could have been $15 million total.
Well, Marcus, I want to tell you that the other problem we have is that I deal with is you have parents who really don't know much. So I had a case last year. I had a young African-American kid who set fire to his classroom at school. So he's charged with arson, serious first-degree felony, serious charge. So I get a report.
Can you say what grade or what age level?
He was like 14. So or 15, 14. I look, so I get a probation report. So I'm looking at this probation report. Kid has an IQ of 160. 160. So I bring the parents into the room with me and I said, look, your son is a genius. I said, here's what happened. The reason he set fire to the classroom is because he was an HISD mediocre school. He's bored. There's no competition. So I told the parents, I said, let me work with you. Let's find a great private school that will give him a scholarship so he can go to school there and compete with kids who are as bright as he is. And so with that, we were able to do that. And I ended up getting him deferred adjudication on his arson. So the case went away in 6 months. No final conviction. Gary. But the problem is the parents, they did not know. And they were in the school district. He wasn't in gifted and talented classes. He's in a regular classroom. This kid ran rings around everybody in his classroom, including the teacher. And so you find, and the parents are powerless. Like you said, we find that when they complain to the school district about things, they don't care. They tell them, whatever, go away, because they don't tell them you don't have power, but they just tell them, and the parents don't know what to do. That's part of the problem. And that's part of my frustration, or why I like doing juvenile work, is I really like helping kids and helping families. So kind of an interesting thing how that all worked out. And I'm sure he'll be a great success.
And part of the, you mentioned that he was bored, and I've seen this a number of times. Wasn't just that he was bored, he was ignored. Why? Yeah. Because he was living and he was breathing, and we did not find it interesting to go.
The teacher didn't even say, the reason he's having issues is because he's so smart. We need to get him where he is challenged, and that never happened. And
in a lot of these classrooms, the teacher is responsible for a wide array of abilities, and so you have one teacher trying to manage, between 20 and 28 kids. And some of them need a lot of intervention at a very basic level. And some of them, like this young man you're talking about, need some challenge.
That young man going up the stairs.
Right? And so, why are we, if we're just focusing on the middle, or, the need that are maybe at the lowest academic level, we're neglecting a lot of students with tremendous potential.
Absolutely.
And, that's something that really needs to change.
Look, for those of us who follow the legislature, there were significant billions, an unprecedented amount of money allotted for catch-up efforts with local ISDs across the state. The money, most of it, was left to the discretion of the school districts to spend. We all need to keep our eye on that money, because it's an extraordinary one-time amount of money, to make sure it's not squandered, to make sure it's not siphoned off, that it is used for the kids and getting them back on track, and maybe even ahead of track. There is some earmarked money for a population I'm particularly concerned about, which is the special needs kids. That money is earmarked, and local journalists need to make sure that they're spending that money where it's supposed to be spent. Right. Because if no one's looking, and we're going to talk about this more next week, if no one's looking, people will abuse the system. Anyway,
money will disappear.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
They'll do it while people are
Tomorrow.
Yes.
True.
Listen,
Tomorrow, what's been on your mind lately?
Okay. I wanted to go back to what we said about what you all were just debating about, that I wasn't in on. The debate about whether the resources are going to the proper things to prevent crime. As I said, my son was a part of Change Happens. I believe in giving activities to youth over the summer, because I don't mind. It's the devil's workshop. That's why they say crime goes up in the summer and everything else. I don't have a problem with that. But when you, on the other hand, deliberately, manipulatively reduce and take back funds from law enforcement that they saved so they could do their own programs, then I have a problem with that. And do I think the 11 million could have been used? I wish the 11 million had been used for what the hell it was supposed to be used for, because plenty of people died from COVID who didn't know where to go get a shot, who didn't know what resources were available, who they didn't reach out to because they were trying to use it as a political contract instead of the purpose of the contract. And that's why they in the mess they in. Because I'm telling you, there are apartments, and I only know this because of the ice storm that we had, and we were delivering resources to areas in Gulfton, in the Sharpstown area, in the Gulf Freeway area. There's apartments that you wouldn't even think you were in the United States. I'm not lying.
Third world.
They look like they're in a third world country. I mean, you're talking about apartments that never got fixed up from Harvey.
I saw the article where the sewage is coming up in the apartment complex.
I mean, just unimaginable. Wow. And when we went out there with the water and ice, they were asking us, did y'all bring food? Well, we wasn't here to bring food. We was here to bring water. Oh, because we don't have gas. We don't have no food. I'm like, oh my God. It was so disheartening that this is in the 4th largest city in America. And when you look at the money that was supposed to go for Harvey, that should have been used to help people, but it wasn't. And you look at the COVID money. Now look, I'm going to say this again. I know y'all don't like it. I don't care. The Trump era border patrol policies should have been kept in place till we can get our crap together. Because like Marcus said, for the living children, nobody give a damn that they've been missing from HISD, Spring ISD, Katie. They don't know where these kids are. This is a generation that we will lose. I can't imagine not being able to walk across the stage and graduate from high school, not being able to have a senior prom, not being able to have no, they lost all of that. Okay, March, you ready to get ready to send out graduation invitations. Y'all got to remember, this happened in March of 2020. They shut everything down. These kids had plans, and the shock that this did to them. And then to their parents who were working in the movie theaters, working at the sports, all that went away. We need to recapture the children that are breathing, that are missing, that we ain't find. One of them was dead in an apartment with his siblings for a year. And nobody looked into it.
And that's a really a huge symptom of a cultural disaster in that
That's
case.
what I'm saying. I'm with Marcus. Let's look at the living children that we got. And you know, I'm a mama before I'm anything. I'm a mama. My son had me years ago drive to the downtown library before they fixed it up because he was looking for a friend of his. If you saw the homeless teenagers, it was heartbreaking. Those kids, none of them were over 18, out there living on the street. That's why everything that I have, we would give to the Covenant House off in Montrose. Because these,
And
you're still a child.
If you see
You're
those
still a
children
child when
over
you're a
there,
teenager. You're
yeah,
still a child. You don't
You
know
are.
a damn thing, nothing. And we just let them out there. So
Look,
I mean,
I said on this program, probably in overtime, when everybody was forced out of the schools and online, my father, is a lifetime educator, talked to one of his good friends who's assistant superintendent at a San Antonio school district. And he predicted then that when all of this was over, there was going to be a 15, potentially 20% drop in class participation because so many kids out there got comfortable going to school online. Kids who, felt alienated at school, kids who are, going to a traditional bricks and mortar school wasn't a great experience for them, and they were more comfortable in their home. I'm not surprised we've had fall off because kids decided I'm going to continue with the online education because frankly,
I don't know if they
happy
continue
you're
with
here.
online. They just
I don't
stopped going.
Chau,
right?
you're muted.
yeah, I'm not talking about that, Greg. I'm not talking about that continue with online.
Okay.
I'm talking about these children are missing.
Yeah.
Okay, I have friends that work at HIZ. They cannot find these children.
Oh,
I'm
they become
talking second
dropouts.
grade,
Yeah.
third
they
grade,
drop
fifth
out.
grade, sophomores. They cannot find them.
Dropout.
But
Wow.
look, if your parents are suffering because they can't financially make it, then the kids are going to drop out of school. I mean, we've seen that for years, Greg. You and I covering cases of kids who are, knocking on doors, constables knocking on doors looking for the kids, and the kids are saying, well, I got to work. Well, no one's here to take care of my siblings.
Right.
I mean, I think a lot of that has happened. That's why you're seeing the drop off, not because they chose to go back online on school. They just
well,
didn't.
let's
And
examine.
that is going to take an effect on our entire community.
Exactly.
Lack of education.
Let's examine before COVID, right? When I was in the classroom, I had a kid that had some challenges. Good kid, but wasn't performing academically. I couldn't connect with him, but I started. He joined my basketball team, and we built a bond, right? So I'm seeing him in the classroom, I'm seeing him on the court, and we started to make progress. And I was really excited about the progress that we made. One day, he didn't do an assignment, or he didn't do what he was supposed to do academically, and I was heartbroken almost to the point where I was upset with him, right? Because we were making such good progress. Well, I was flabbergasted when I found out why. Because he was the sole provider of any and everything for his younger children the night before and the night before that, right? When I say sole provider, his mom was out, in the streets. So he had to make sure that his siblings were fed, that lights were on, because the night before they had slept in the park because they had gotten locked out. These were real scenarios, real situations, right? That were illuminated when COVID hit. My point is, we weren't taking care of our business beforehand.
Right.
And COVID exposed
Yep.
where we really don't give a damn about what's happening in our cities and in our states. Man, there's a place that I pass every Sunday and every Saturday, right around the corner, where there are 15, 20 people outside with posters protesting, right? You know what they're protesting. We need to save the children. Why aren't they in front of those apartments that Tomaro just described? Saving those children. that are living in the house for an entire year with their dead sibling.
Yep.
We got our priorities mixed up, and we illuminate this and we magnify it with this 50-year-old arguments of immigration and abortion. And I'm not saying these issues aren't important, but they're all political folly. They're footballs, while we ignore the fact that these other things are happening for real. Lastly, with regard to education and the drop-off, I think our nation was already failing in the area of education. Right? We were in an outdated, archaic system. My children did okay. Why? Because they go to a school where this online thing was a part of their everyday routine. So instead of it being 60-40, they had to switch it to 40-60, right? Or 30-70. It was not a shock, as much of a shock to children who had not been exposed to that. Why in 2022 or 2020, when we have so many children that are living online every day, had we not already gravitated towards something new and innovative for our children with regard to education?
I have a question for you. You said outdated and archaic. What do you mean specifically when you say outdated and archaic? Because I mean, there are some things, that are problematic. How archaic they are is an important question. And what specifically are you talking about?
Just our entire approach to education. Our entire approach that education is getting up every day on this old agrarian calendar, right? This calendar of agriculture, okay, right? Getting up at 7 o'clock in the morning, being in the classroom by 8, staying in there till 3, and these are the subjects that you learn, and this is the test that you have to take in order to pass this, and then you go on. My son went to a school where they went out every day, right? They got up. They went from building to building. They went from museum to museum. They went from library to library. And that was part of their education. I homeschooled my son for about 3 years because I wanted him to have the experience of getting up, being an entrepreneur every day. The thing that Tomaro mentioned is a progressive thought, right? Of let's do something new and innovative. Gilbert Garcia is every bit of 55 years old. So that program's been around for a long time. And you tell me we haven't caught wind of how great it is and haven't emulated it. We're not teaching finances in school the way we should be teaching the stuff that I do every day.
But we're not teaching social emotional learning. I mean, we got to do more.
Okay. First of all, let me make a couple of points.
When I say,
Let Holly speak real quick. Let Holly speak.
First of all, I want to say you're right about one thing. You talked about the calendar. If we were paying attention to science, we would not have teenagers waiting at the bus stop at 6 o'clock in the morning. Exactly. Because as a teenager, their circadian rhythms say that they're up later at night and sleep later in the morning. Okay, so we've got these groggy, overtired kids sitting out there. I see them at the bus stop, and they're all staring at their phones. I think there's a mix here of what's going on. There has been a trend in the past, I don't know how many years, that says, having kids memorize information is inherently bad. And I would agree that you can't just have memorization, but I think this is one of the problems where we've gotten into, this early education where we're not giving kids foundational knowledge that they need to engage in higher level thinking. So we're trying to jump over a step there and say, oh, we're going to have these 5-year-olds learn critical thinking. Well, how do you teach that? What are the specifics of getting someone to the point where they can engage in higher level thinking? And, you can't skip steps along the way. If you're going to do higher level math, I'm sorry, but you have to memorize the multiplication tables. Yeah, you're going to have to get some understanding of how that works, but you've got to have that basic foundational knowledge to get to the next steps. And I think there's too many people, and they're well-intentioned. I'm not saying they're evil or bad, but they want to throw out the baby with the bathwater and kind of jump ahead there. And so my question is, when people say they're going to teach critical thinking, you hear that all the time, is like, how do you define critical thinking? What are the specific ways that you're going to teach critical thinking? And how are you going to measure the success or failure thereof of your approach? Just questions to throw out there.
Well, I think what I heard Marcus saying is it's not a one size fits all when it comes to education. And we've had for so many centuries a one-size-fits-all standard for education. And we know it doesn't work for every child. You got to meet children where they're at, and they're not always at that. I'm going to go to school. I'm going to take 7 subjects. I'm going to wake up at 7, come home at 4, and it's going to work for me because it didn't work for, it doesn't work for every child.
And I do love what you said too
We've had
about
a one
activity,
size, but it didn't
because
fit all.
well, and I love what you said too about, activity. I sent my younger son to a school that, in the lower grades, they had 2 recesses a day, and then lunch period, was unstructured time where the kids ate, and then they were encouraged to go outside and play without, somebody standing there and telling them exactly what to do. And, there's just so many different pieces to this puzzle, but you're right. And I also, homeschooled my boys for some portions of their education. They also went to formal schooling as well, but I wanted them to experience different things. And as teenagers, we made both of our kids have jobs working. We thought it was really good for them to work fast food and work at retail. And these
my 2 children,
lessons, that's part of your education.
Right. Well, my son, he was an actor. My son started acting, and I mean on a national level. He had a national commercial at 8 years old. It was supposed to be him and Tiger Woods. So being that young, he was taught by the director, who was very straight, that, this all costs money. We're all at our job. You're on a job just like us. When we tell you this, when we tell you this, you got to be on the mark. You got the role out of 600 boys. We picked you, and you're going to show us. That man came to me. He said, we've had 17 retakes. Your son hasn't missed his mark one time. And I told him, well, he's been acting since he was 3. He went to St. James Episcopal, where they watched you in pre-K see what did you like to do. My son loved attention, okay? Still does. So they would put him in the background in the play, and invariably by the end of the scene, he was in the front, even though he was supposed to be a stump. He was supposed to be a tree. He was supposed to be an immobile part of the background. He in the front. And so I put him in private school, and then I homeschooled him for 2 years. Then he begged me to go to public school. He wanted to run for homecoming king. I said, baby, look now, mama love you, but you don't know nobody. How you gonna win homecoming king? You just, mama, I'm gonna run. Girl, why he win? He won his freshman year homecoming king for Lamar. He said, oh, mama, I know how to talk to people. My daughter, she went to Rice until 8th grade. Then she went to Lamar. It worked for her. Public elementary school did not work for him because of the regiment, and you got to do this at this time, this way. It didn't work for him. I believe that we need to get rid of some of this monolithic ways of doing things and do it in a different way. I don't think charter schools are all bad, but I have seen some bad charter schools. Ain't gonna lie to you, I have. But I believe, and I hate to go back to this, before we start talking about bringing other people in the country, we need to look at what we got here. Charity begins at home. Look at what you're doing with your own kids right here. And that way, when you get that working, which it is not, when you get that fully functioning, which it is not, then you can look at reaching out for others. But hell, we need to take care of our own. And I mean the living, Marcus, so you ain't got to ask. I'm talking about the living, okay? We need to look after them.
The question is, I know you're referring to immigration. The question is, do we expand that thought to what's happening in Congress right now, where we're considering sending more millions and billions of dollars overseas to other countries to address their issues, while we have folks that are suffering in the United States? That's a real question.
Are you talking about foreign aid specifically, or military aid for Ukraine?
I'm talking about both. I'm talking about both. Again, I believe that the United States should be a participant in curing some things across the country. I don't know that we should be sacrificing our own American citizens, which we are, for others. I just question that.
I think there's a delicate balancing act there.
And it's a very delicate situation, right? I am not trying to be insensitive or inhumane. I'm
That's
just trying
a great point. I got some information over the weekend. I haven't really looked into it too much, but there's a charitable organization here in Houston that is supposed to be helping Houstonians. And for some reason, they're sending huge amounts of money into to Caribbean and South American nations. And so, that's kind of curious. And there's, that's great. Charity is great, right? And you'd love to help people in third world countries. But if your mission is to help Houstonians and Houstonian children who are in need, why are these huge dollars amounts going into these other nations?
Interestingly,
our government does that as well.
I live near the intersection of South Braeswood and Gessner.
Okay.
There are large swaths of apartments there, and they have traditionally attracted immigrants from all over the world. And for a while there were a lot of clearly newcomers from African nations. Now, as I drive back and forth to my destinations, I see folks who, I profiling, call it what you will, they appear to be from Afghanistan, a lot of them. And
we've supported a lot of
and
families.
it was amazing seeing a large group of newcomers walking their kids to the school bus in the morning, and it's part of the fabric of who we are, immigration. And I agree with components of everything that was said today. We do need to get our house in order. And I am concerned about a large influx of folks overwhelming the system. And we don't have much affordable housing. I mean,
No.
Look, we have huge issues to contend with here, and they're going to be with us. But they are not unprecedented. Right? They are not unprecedented. Hey, I want to change the subject real quickly.
Okay.
Got about 15 minutes less. To encrypted messaging systems like Signal. Chau Nguyen, you're one of the most delightfully social people I know. Do you feel the need to have encrypted messaging apps for absolute secrecy? I have the answer, at least on Signal, because your personal phone is not tied to it. Now, there are others on our panel who have the encrypted app, but I'm going to do a report tomorrow night about encrypted apps on the personal phones of public servants and elected officials, and how our folks in Austin who study this stuff say it is an absolute black box for government, defeating all the statutes on the books right now, and that it gives them absolute deniability. They can have shadow government in the dark and with absolute deniability, and it should worry us all. So anyway,
yeah, well, it
Gary?
violates the open meetings law.
Records Act.
We know that,
know
among
so.
other things. But look, the reason
Yeah.
that the public officials are using Signal is because they're talking about things they don't want anyone else to know about. Maybe the Signal, if Signal wasn't around, there would be cell phone evidence of the conspiracy to give out the $11 million contract. I mean, there's all kinds of possibilities. I don't use Signal. I actually never heard of it.
Or the conspiracy to overthrow
the
government on January 6th.
Well, and that could be too, and that was wrong.
Believe me, on this cell phone is 20 years of personal cell phones of politicians and political operatives. Believe me, lots of names showed up, and they were in both parties. We will report that tomorrow night.
Interesting.
And I just think that it's extremely concerning. In fact, Bill Aylshire, who's a former Democratic county judge in Travis County, who serves as a volunteer lawyer for the Freedom of Information Foundation, says this is a gaping hole in the bottom of the boat of transparency. It could spell the end of transparency as far as government is concerned unless we address it. And the only way we can catch people now is with whistleblowers. So I'm all ears, whistleblowers. If people are conducting government business Go ahead, Chau.
It impinges on our democracy. This is why journalists are there, to be the watchdogs, to be the whistleblowers. That's very true. I don't have a big account.
Here's a question, right? And I think this is very dangerous. And Greg, shout out to Greg for discovering this, reporting this, and bringing this to the public. The question is, how much different is it than what is already currently happening? We sat here and talked about an $11 million contract that was done in the daylight, not in the dark. We sat here and talked about the railroad company that in the daylight contributes to politicians to get them to shush on letting cancer exist in a particular neighborhood. We in the daylight allow elected officials to get millions of dollars in their campaign financing in order to be lobbied for legislation for big companies that benefit them over the individuals. We don't need to break the code. We know flat out, point blank, period, that our government is being sold to the highest bidder, and yet as American citizens, we're not doing enough about it. I think what you're describing is the icing on the cake. It's evidence of the epidemic that exists. But the question is, once we know this, are we going to do something different? Are we going to change? Are we going to have a different?
Part of the problem is that you mentioned journalism. Objective investigative journalism is becoming a lost art, because now a lot of the recent journalism graduates they're ideologues. They may be conservative ideologues, they may be liberal or leftist ideologues, and they see everything through that lens, which is unfortunate. And you talk about buy-in in America. How about the number of people in America that have been bought by China? Then we haven't really read the whole story on that. It's an astounding number they have paid off and owned. And so that's a big problem. So, light is the antiseptic for corruption. And so what Greg's onto, if this is like the deep, dark secrets, right? You talked about what was clear, right? And you can find it if you look for it. Well, now Signal is where you really put the secrets you don't want anybody to know. So
it's very disturbing. It's one thing for private citizens to use encrypted apps, because I think a lot of us are very concerned about, privacy and, not having our private communications shared publicly, which, there's incidents where, a private citizen goes and speaks to their school board, and then they've got, a reporter, doxing them, I think is the term. But it is incredibly disturbing to think that there are elected officials serving on the same board or, body that are communicating with each other using these encrypted apps and possibly violating those open meeting laws that are so important for transparency. We need to know that, 4 members of the school board are not talking about something and deciding how they're going to vote through Signal or another app, and pretending like they've had this public debate when they're really not. They're deciding things behind closed doors.
Holly,
it is absolutely insidious.
But Holly brought up earlier that elections matter, and they do matter. But the question becomes, do they matter to the people? Because if you look at the turnout from yesterday, it was like 5%. Who really is listening? Who really cares?
Yeah, well, you've got so many elections. You've got these May elections are a terrible time to have elections.
Not just terrible. It is, and I encourage people to get out and vote. But when I first heard, and Tomaro mentioned it earlier, that we're gonna have, we have the one election in May, and then we're gonna turn around and have another one right after that.
Same seat. Yeah.
I was like, man, this is. People will be exhausted, and
you look at the turnout, and it's minuscule. People, elections.
Well, part of school bond issues going on these kind of obscure ballots is designed to ensure that they pass, because they figure if they put it on a general election, the turnout's too big, people just say, "I'm voting no. We're not spending any more money."
Well, just open.
That was the theory.
Just yesterday, I decided I'm going to open that sample ballot from yesterday. It is dizzying as an average citizen to open the sample ballot and look at all the different districts and going, which one is pertinent to where I live at 770. It's dizzy. And that's, I'm an informed voter, but anybody who opens the sample ballot and looks is not going to really understand it unless you really study and read it and stay informed and
Mhm.
stay educated.
Absolutely. And you know, there's some elections that took place that were not on your ballot. You had to go to a separate location if you're in one of these emergency services districts. And I doubt very many people knew about that. And
That's
what their
designed.
turnout is just, yes, by design, right? Because, you know, less attention, less transparency, you know, so some of these emergency services districts need some
Easier to pass.
serious scrutiny. And
They do.
Mindful of what day it is, I'm going to start wrapping this up with what I like to offer everyone. What did we miss? What do we need to keep our eye on? Tomaro Bell, you still with us?
Yes, let me start with this. On May the 12th, we're having a meeting at Good Hope Baptist Church at 3014, I believe, North McGregor, about the historic district application that was put in Riverside Terrace. For you all who don't know, it only takes 10% of a block to get an application moved forward. They did the vote on this and it lost 13 out of 35. What the planning department did was then went around and pulled 3 houses from another street, added it with the 13, and is forcing all the residents on that street to become a historic district. Let me tell y'all what the problem is with that. When you are named a historic property in the city of Houston, you cannot sell your home to whomever you want to. They cannot build whatever they want to. You cannot upgrade your house the way you want to.
The way you want
They
to.
have codes and standards that you must adhere to. The people who live on this street, 90% of them are older African Americans who've been living there for years. The person that put the application in moved there 5 years ago, bought 4 properties, made 3 Airbnbs out of those other properties on that block. Now he will get the benefits the way the state works it for the tax credits, but it will kill the other people's homes and it will reduce what they can leave for their children and the property values of their homes. So we are fighting this because in Texas, property rights are above all rights. And so no neighbor should be able to usurp your property rights and take them from you. And what the neighbors are being told is that this historic designation trumps deed restrictions. So that means somebody can move in your neighborhood, buy houses, and then change what you can do with your own home. When they had the right by law with the city to only have their properties designated historic, but they chose not to because someone said, they said that would not accompany their mission. So we're having a protest. Cherryhurst and Montrose protested and got theirs overturned. We're having a protest meeting, a super neighborhood meeting on Thursday at 6:30 at Good Hope Baptist Church.
Yeah, and let me. Oh, I know Tomorrow stressed it, but I want to make sure people understand. You know, I have experienced this personally in terms of real estate investment. You know, buying and selling a place designated historic is in short, we walked away from a deal because of how many different restrictions and who controls what type of material you can use in your own place. Yeah, I mean, it's that simple. They determine whether or not you can use this type of material to redo your wall or redo your floor in the home that you live in, whether you're selling it or not. And it's at some guy who is way, you know, don't know nothing about you or what you do. Is at their discretion to decide whether or not you can use that kind of paint.
Gary,
Yeah, I'm going to take it a little.
Mindful. We want to be mindful of Esther's Day, so please.
Yes, yeah, I'm going to be.
Okay.
I'll tell you what I'm concerned about this week, and that's I think the greatest threat of nuclear war since the Cuban Missile Crisis. You know, I mean, I support the idea of supporting Ukrainians in their fight against the Russians. However, loose lips sink ships, and apparently there's a problem with the Biden administration. And people want to talk about all the stuff they're doing to help Ukraine and how we gave them the technology, or our AWACS is identifying the ships or the planes that the Ukrainians are shooting down, right? So the Russians are reading this, and that's why Putin is now saying, well, the war is really with NATO and America. It's not with Ukraine. That is a big problem because Putin is a little bit unstable. Biden has a tendency to talk and not think before he says it. We could talk our way into a nuclear war. If Putin uses a tactical nuclear weapon, do we even know what we're going to do? Are we going to use a tactical nuclear weapon then? Or what if they attack somewhere in Europe, and before you know it, it's World War III. It's the nightmare we had growing up, the end of the world. This could happen, and I don't think there's enough discussion about what are the potential. Is anyone looking at this?
Yeah,
I don't know.
And Garrett, thank you for bringing that up. And I want to share this, and this is just a thought. And I don't want, well, of course, I'm going to get some feedback on it. But as I was watching the devastation in Ukraine, as I was watching the, places being obliterated, I'm just watching buildings being blown up and watching people so desperate for life and the necessities of life. And I got to thinking, I understand why. I don't know if we consider whether or not this much tragedy would have existed if we had gone in a different direction. Meaning, would there have been this much bloodshed and this much death if Ukraine and Russia had dealt with their issue, and if Ukraine attained it? I don't know that we can label, put all of the tragedy that's happening simply on one side without considering, well, maybe if you had conceded a few things, then people might have lived. And to your point, Gary, it may escalate into something that's going to affect the rest of the world. And I don't know that we're giving it that much thought to it. And we have to go back to what is the original argument about, right? I think sometimes we get caught up in fighting. We have to ask, what were we fighting for? What is the original argument about? What is the basic disagreement between Russia and Ukraine? That Russia owns a part of the land? What is the basic disagreement? And then you look at what tragedy is occurring as a result, and you ask yourself whether or not it's worth it.
Centuries.
Hold on, Holly.
Yeah.
It's a centuries old problem.
Go ahead.
And it's not easily resolved. And there's been, yes, it's ultimately between Russia and Ukraine, but the whole world needs to take interest for some of the reasons that Gary outlined there. And there's been foreign policy missteps going back decades in this situation. But, I appreciate your interest in solving the basic problem there, Marcus, but it's very complicated. It's like the Middle East. I mean, you have the same kind of thing going on there where you've got these age-old competitions over, who is entitled to this land. Russia's always wanted to have the Crimea and this access here along that coast. It's been important to them since the time of Peter the Great. So unraveling those things, not an easy task at all.
I think
it's not limited. And it's not limited. Hold on.
If Russia had that access, will we see this? Will people be dying in their homes?
Are you suggesting that maybe Ukraine should have just given them the
all I'm asking is, would we be seeing the tragedy that we're seeing now if that had happened?
Well, part of the problem was we guaranteed Ukraine's safety, by the way, with the Russians when they gave up their nuclear weapons.
Correct.
Number two, the administration knew for months and months the Russians were getting ready to invade, and the serious weapons they needed to deter that were not sent there.
That's right.
And then we had Biden saying stupid things like, well, partial invasion, and that we'll have to look at that. So there were signals given by them to the Russians, we're not going to do anything. So,
that's exactly right.
Like you said, what you say matters, how you act matters. Look, if we'd sent them the heavy weapons before and said we're going to support them when the Russians have invaded, I would suggest no. But they saw an opportunity. They thought they had a green light. And that goes to what you talked about, Marcus, talking, communicating. Did you give them a green light behind the scenes or did you not?